with Kieran Gilbert.
Good morning and welcome to the program. The government will scrap the signature environmental policy of the former Prime Minister Tony Abbott. The Financial Review reports this morning, and government sources have confirmed the details to me, that the Green Army will be no more as of the mid-year budget update, December 19, to be handed down by Treasurer Scott Morrison. The move will save upwards of $350 million over 4 years, $100 million of which will go into land care as part of that deal done with the Greens to get their support for the revised backpacker tax. For more on this, I spoke to the Environment Minister, Josh Frydenberg.
I'll leave all those budget announcements to the Treasurer and to the Finance Minister, but I will say that the Green Army has been a successful program. More than 1,000 projects have been rolled out. It's led to the planting of more than 2 million trees, the clearing of more than 90,000 hectares of weeds, but at the same time we're facing significant budget pressures, and obviously savings do need to be found, but I don't want to preempt any announcements that will come in due course.
Well, given that you've committed $100 million to land care as part of that deal with the Greens to get them on board for the backpacker tax, the land care initiative and Green Army, they're basically very similar initiatives, aren't they? So doesn't it make sense, if you're going to be spending more in that regard, to get rid of the other?
Well, they are different programs, and as you know, land care is an integrated approach to environmental management with the agricultural sector, and has been very successful to date as well. But we are focused as a government on better land management, recognising whether it's the coastal ecosystems or whether it's more inland, that we have to ensure that our land management is world class, and more money for land care is one way of achieving that.
Now, I know you say that it's been successful, this Green Army project. Philip Curry reports it today in the Financial Review that it's gone. I've subsequently had it confirmed to me by government sources as well that it is going. If it is such a great project, why is it going?
Well, as you know, we have to find savings right across the board because we inherited such a big black hole from the Labor Party. Now, I will leave those announcements to the Treasurer and to the Finance Minister for their appropriate budget updates. But every portfolio and every program is always looking to find a few savings, to tip in if they can, and so of course that is just the environment in which we work in.
Let's look at the review of the government's climate response, the direct action program and other areas. There's been a lot of focus on the power industry, the intensity scheme that's been suggested in this review. Does that amount to another carbon price if you did pursue that?
Oh no, we've absolutely rejected the Labor Party's approach to a whole of economy carbon price, whether it was the carbon tax or whether it was the ETS or the other dozen positions that they adopted. Now, we committed to a review to make sure we were on track to meet our 2030 targets, which are pretty ambitious, 26 to 28% reduction by 2030 on 2005 levels, which on a per capita basis are above 50% and one of the highest in the G20. Now,
but you say whole of economy, what about industry-specific carbon price, like this power industry intensity scheme which has been referred to in the review? That'd be an industry-specific carbon price, wouldn't it?
Well, the review is explicit about looking at sector-by-sector approaches, and given that the electricity sector is about 1/3 of the total emissions across the economy, it's only appropriate to see if we've got the best mechanisms in place. Now, a number of organisations have recommended an emissions intensity scheme, but again, this review has a long way to go. There will be substantial consultation, there will be a discussion paper, and then there will be a position finalised, at the end of next year. So it would be wrong for me today, just announcing the review, to preempt what the outcomes would be.
But it is but you do admit that that is a carbon price as put forward if you were to adopt it. That element of the intensity scheme within the power and electricity industry, that would effectively amount to a carbon price.
No, I'm not admitting that. And at the same time, as you know, we already have a safeguards mechanism legislated as part of our system where 150 companies have limits on the amount of emissions that they can actually produce. But what we are focused on is the lowest cost of abatement, how to deal with that trilemma of issues. Energy security at the top, energy affordability, and obviously transitioning to a lower emissions future. We've rejected outright Labor's higher taxing, higher electricity prices approach. We've rejected the states with their unrealistic renewable energy targets. And as has been pointed out in this review, we're not looking at the 2020 renewable energy target, which is set at 23.5%, but I've made it clear that that is a pretty expensive way to get to your goal of lower emissions, and surely there are other more efficient and effective mechanisms.
But but again, I'll ask you, if it's an intensity-based scheme within that sector, the power industry, why is it such an evil phrase to be saying it's a carbon price when most experts would say that it is?
Well, as you know, it's a sector approach as opposed to an economy-wide one. It's a baseline and credit scheme, but we have not made any decisions, let alone even kicked off this review.
Okay.
So I don't want to get into a debate about terminology, because we really want to have the broader discussion about how does Australia meet its targets while at the same time keeping the lights on and prices affordable.
And obviously within that mix, you don't believe renewable energy targets are necessary beyond 2020? There's no reference to that target being maintained beyond 2020?
Well, Kieran, we've got a tough job as it is meeting our 2020 target, because currently we have about 15% of our electricity being generated by renewables, and we've got to get to 23.5% by 2020. We're seeing big strides forward in the technology around renewables, namely solar has come down by about 80% in the last 7 years in terms of price, and wind down by about 50%, and battery storage is improving rapidly, both the length of time and the density of the amount of power that you can store. But we've just got to ensure that the system remains stable, and our biggest criticism of the South Australian Labor government is that they've been headlong in the pursuit of more renewables into their system, some 40%, without understanding the knock-on impacts for the stability of their system. And
but federally, do you think that a renewable energy target is redundant now?
No, I'm not saying that at all. We've got a target, and it's to 2020, and that is sticking.
But again, I say to you that the review doesn't touch on beyond 2020, so it seems that that's its use-by date.
Well, 23.5% is a big target by 2020. At the same time, what we're looking at in this review is a whole of government approach to say what is the lowest cost of abatement, whether that is through changes around vehicle emissions, around white goods and standards for the built environment. They're all the issues that we will look at in the context of trying to drive down our carbon footprint while keeping prices affordable. We've rejected the carbon price and the carbon tax that has been applied in the past by the Labor Party. We want to find our own way going forward and do it in the least costly way possible.
Well, one of the areas that you could do that is international permits. Is that something you're inclined to support as part of a reworked direct action or coalition approach to climate change?
Well, we've said publicly that we will consider international permits, and the business community have talked positively about acquiring international permits, and it has been part of previous international agreements like Kyoto. And countries like South Korea and New Zealand do allow the trading of international permits. So this is an issue we will look at seriously in the context of this review. Okay,
and finally, the Adani coal mine protest is expected outside the Commonwealth offices today. What, if anything, is the government's position in terms of this particular mine? There are suggestions you're going to commit to $1 billion to provide support for the rail corridor into the Carmichael mine. Is that true?
Well, as the Resources Minister has made clear, no investment decision has been taken by the independent board, which decides how we make those loans available to ensure more spending on infrastructure. The railway itself is a multi-use facility that has been talked about and was one of the ideas put forward by the Queensland Labor government as an area where the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility should look at. So I will leave that to the Minister for Northern Australia, but no final investment decisions have been taken.
Given the dredging near the Great Barrier Reef of that particular project that would be necessary, are you comfortable with it going ahead?
Well, we have actually banned the disposal of capital dredge material in the Barrier Reef Marine Park, and we're very focused on ensuring that the reef is protected in every possible way. So whatever activities are undertaken in surrounding areas, they will be done with the utmost care and to the strictest possible environmental conditions. But again, I don't want to preempt decisions, actions, developments that may or may not occur.